The Toronto Blue Jays have a massive problem, and that is coming in the form of George Springer and a lot of other veteran players that have just not lived up to their contracts. So I'll break that down and much more on this episode of 3 Up, 3 Down. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis. Welcome into 3 Up, 3 Down. Today we're going to be talking about the Toronto Blue Jays, and I know I had a video on them yesterday, but that was because of breaking news. Now, I am a Blue Jay fan. I tend to stay pretty neutral in the sense that I love Major League Baseball, and I just love watching great talent go to work on a nightly basis. But I watch the Blue Jays the most. I'm not going to kid you guys. But what I saw yesterday, the fake comeback. They were down 5-1 heading into to the top of the ninth inning. Then they made it 5-3. The bases were loaded for George Springer with no outs. And the game ended 5-4. The Milwaukee Brewers ended up holding on and grabbing the win. But the Blue Jays showed some fight and they showed some character. Something that we haven't really seen from them this season. But then George Springer came up and had one of his worst at-bats of the year. And he's been really bad this season. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. But before we do that, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and comment your thoughts on the recent play of the Toronto Blue Jays. I'll give you my thoughts, my quick thoughts. Hasn't been good, but let me know what you think down below. So the first thing I want to look at here is this. Fun fact, headed into today, the Blue Jays were hitting .232, which would be the lowest batting average by a Blue Jays team in a full season. Jays hit .226 in the strike-shortened 1981 season. So one more time, the Jays are hitting .232 this year, and maybe that average went down, maybe that went up after yesterday's ninth inning. But it has not been good for them, to put it lightly. And you have a lot of big contracts on that team, like Kevin Kiermaier, who's making close to $10 million, like Justin Turner, who's making about $12 to $13 million, and Justin Turner, and George Springer, who's signed for another 2 seasons after this one, who's 34 years old and has been one of the worst qualified hitters in Major League Baseball this season. He's making $25 million. So let's take a look over here. Justin Turner, Kevin Kiermaier, and George Springer are 39, 34, and 34 years old, respectively. They have now logged a combined 611 plate appearances this season with a cumulative weighted runs created plus of 80. There is simply no excuse for this. Now, I mean, the excuse is that they're aging and that they're not the same players that they were earlier in their careers. But I always thought that bringing back Kevin Kiermaier by Ross Atkins was one of the more puzzling moves that I've seen in recent memory. It just doesn't make sense. You have Dalton Varsho, who's the best defensive outfielder in baseball, at your disposal, who can play center field at a platinum glove level, yet you choose to bring back a glove first guy in Kevin Kiermaier. That didn't make sense to me. George Springer, at the time, it was a very good contract. He had a couple of very good seasons with the Blue Jays, but just not enough, and that's evident right here in his numbers. So in his first year with the Jays, he only played 78 games because he couldn't stay healthy, and he had a .907 OPS. He had 22 home runs in those 78 games. He was crucial down the stretch for them in their playoff run. Ultimately, they ended up missing out by 1 game, but he was one of their best players that season. You fast forward to the next year, an .814 OPS, hitting at the top of that lineup, 25 home runs. It was a good season for him, and that's when you fast forward to the next season and you start to see the decline. He was barely above league average last season, and his counting stats look pretty good on the surface. The 21 home runs, the 72 RBIs, the 20 stolen bases, those are good counting stats, but that's because he played 154 games. He was primarily in right field, and they were trying to keep him healthy. That was the goal, and they did do that. They kept him healthy and kept him on the field, but it didn't really translate to gaudy numbers that we've seen from George Springer. Let's go back to his Houston Astro days, where he was a consistent 800 OPS guy with flashes of a 900 OPS, and that was the player that the Blue Jays thought they were getting. We knew that the contract might age poorly because he signed it when he was 31 years old, and it was a 6-year deal. But it was always going to be him going to right field and transitioning there. But his fall off has really been bad. It's really been bad. He's been one of the worst qualified hitters in baseball this year with a 582 OPS, only 5 home runs. He's stealing 8 bases, which is good, I guess, but he's not getting on base enough, and he was hitting leadoff for the majority of those games before the Jays finally moved him to the bottom half of the order in the 6 or 7 spot. And he's getting paid big time money. Let's not kid ourselves. He's got to produce, but you could tell that the bat speed isn't there, and that's evident with his baseball savant here. It's in the 47th percentile, which is actually misleading in my opinion, because he has not been hitting fastballs. He has not been hitting the ball hard when he is making contact. And look at the top figure right there, the batting run value. He's in the 7th percentile, -9 batting run value. He's been a good fielder, been a good base runner this season, but he's getting paid to produce with the bat, and he has not been doing that. So George Springer has to figure something out here if he does figure it out. But the Blue Jays, in my opinion, should try benching him. We've seen it with Eugenio Suarez and the Arizona Diamondbacks. They haven't been shy to go out and bench a guy who's making a ton of money. George Springer is a bit of a different circumstance. He's a leader on the field, but he's not leading by example right now. And take the clubhouse stuff out of it, he's been one of their worst players. Bar none. He's been one of the worst players on the Toronto Blue Jays this season. And I don't know if they can keep justifying putting him in the lineup. So let's look at the worst slugging percentage with runners in scoring position this season. And Orlando Arcia is at the top there with a 163 slug. The Braves have not been good this year. And 208 right behind him is George Springer. Struck out with the bases loaded in the 9th inning of today's 5-4 Blue Jays loss versus Milwaukee. Then you have Paul Goldschmidt, Jorge Soler, Jared Triolo. So, you know, there are a lot of players underperforming around Major League Baseball this season. There's no doubt about that. But George Springer, the fall off from, we knew that he was declining as of last season because of the 102 OPS plus and him just not hitting the ball as hard as he usually does. The bat speed is not there. He can't catch up to the fastball anymore. And yesterday in the at-bat against McGill, the closer of the Milwaukee Brewers, he was just totally lost up there. Totally lost. And it's been a rough watch, George Springer, this season. He has not been good, to put it lightly. And I hope he turns it around, because he is a very fun player to watch when he is going, but I just don't think he can get back to that. I think he's not washed up, but he's a little bit past his prime, and he's not a big-time big leaguer anymore. He's not. He's not the $25 million player that the Blue Jays went out and signed. He wasn't that last year. He's even further from that this year. But that'll wrap it up for this episode of 3 Up, 3 Down. Thank you guys so much for making it this far. Let us know your thoughts on George Springer and the performance of the Toronto Blue Jays this season. I haven't been a fan of it. I've been pretty vocal on that, but we'll see you in tomorrow's video. Make sure to stay tuned and subscribe for more daily content throughout the week. But until then, enjoy the baseball, folks.